exists, the stairs that lead the way to the cauldron.
But because the games are about inclusion and legacy, a ramp appears.
Through Dr. Ludwig Gutmann's creation of the Paralympic Games, which is a sporting event for disabled athletes, which took a stand by changing the common view of disabled individuals and providing hope for them, the Games have altered the way society views those with disabilities, proving that handicapped athletes can perform extreme acts of athleticism, much like able-bodied competitors. Dr. Ludwig Gutmann, sometimes referred to as the father of Paralympics, dramatically changed the way that disabled athletes are viewed through his life works. Ludwig Gutmann, when he was just 18 years old, witnessed an unforgettable scene while volunteering at an accident hospital for coal miners. A young miner was brought into the hospital paralyzed from the waist down due to a broken back. Young Ludwig Gutmann watched as this miner was put on bed rest, quarantined away from all the other patients, and died within just 5 weeks. Later, Dr. Ludwig Gutmann made this statement:
"Although during future years of my career, I saw many more such victims suffering from the same fate, it was the picture of that young man which remained indelibly fixed in my mind."
This mindset stayed with Dr. Ludwig Gutmann as he progressed through his life and studies. Dr. Ludwig Gutmann reluctantly went into a job in neurology and neurosurgery. Little did he know, this decision would prove to be the most important one of his lifetime. This eventually led him to be in charge of the small spinal cord unit at Stoke Mandeville. Here, Dr. Ludwig Gutmann was free to implement his own ways of treatment to his patients. Instead of the regular bed rest that most patients were condemned to, Dr. Ludwig Gutmann started slowly introducing movement into his patients' treatment. What started out as 2-hourly turning of patients to relieve pressure sores slowly evolved into the competitive sports that are now included in the Paralympic Games. The Paralympic Games, which were initially created to increase the health of spinal injury patients, have not only gone on to have physical improvements in patients, but also psychological and social improvements. The view of the disabled, of themselves, and society's opinion of them was something that Dr. Gutmann had to constantly face. At the time, there was a widely accounted opinion that once patients were paralyzed, they faced a bleak future without any hope of social integration. It was stated by Dr. Gutmann himself that
they could not understand how I could leave Oxford University to be engulfed in the hopeless and depressing task of looking after traumatic spinal paraplegics.
The pointlessness of the task Dr. Ludwig Gutmann was undertaking, in the general eye of medical professionals, is again pointed out by His Royal Highness Prince Charles in the foreword of Spirit of Stoke Mandeville, which was written after the Paralympics had significantly developed.
It is amazing to think that not that many years ago, the treatment of paraplegics was generally regarded as a waste of time.
In Gutmann's time, not only did the general public hold the popular opinion that a disabled patient's future was unpropitious, but the patients themselves also felt disconnected to society due to their new physical impediments. Dr. Gutmann also writes of this opinion when describing the former mindset of his patients.
For the disabled, the sudden awareness of his changed body image resulting from these abnormal patterns of movement often results in psychological tension between himself and his surrounding world, which makes social contact with his able-bodied fellow men difficult and sometimes even impossible.
The inferiority felt by the patients, as shown by this quote, increased social tension and uneasiness in patients. Dr. Ludwig Gutmann believed that this new treatment of his patients would lead to reinstatement of hope and self-belief. This treatment that included physical activities such as archery allowed patients to be active. These physical activities also provided physical benefits along with psychological ones, such as increasing the self-opinion of patients once they knew that they were capable of completing the same task as able-bodied people. His treatment of them focused on not only physical exercise, but also on skill-based activities. His willingness to teach them life-aiding skills would later help guarantee an easier transition back into society. The evolution of sports for the disabled started with the founding of the Stoke Mandeville Games by Dr. Ludwig Gutmann. The first one of these games was held at Stoke Mandeville on July 29, 1948, the same day as the Olympic opening ceremony. These games had only 16 total competitors. The games grew to become the International Stoke Mandeville Games after 2 former Dutch servicemen joined the games in 1952. The games continued to grow before taking place in Rome to become the first Paralympic Games in 1960. Although at the time these games were still referred to as the International Stoke Mandeville Games, they have been viewed as the first Paralympic Games due to the fact that they were the first International Stoke Mandeville Games to be held in the same city and country as the Olympic Games. This is the first time that disabled athletes truly get to compete alongside able-bodied individuals. These games were also the biggest up to this point, with 400 athletes from 23 countries competing in this first Paralympic Games. From 1960, the first Paralympic Games, to 1976, the Paralympic Games were limited to just athletes with spinal injuries. In 1976, and in the following years, many organizations for the disabled pushed for people with other disabilities to be included in these games. Slowly but surely, the Paralympic Games expanded their reach to become the Paralympics we know today, including people with all types of disabilities in a very large range of sports. Despite the changes in the games, including adding more sports and more disabilities, the inspiration and effects of the Paralympics has stayed the same. This is displayed through the many stories of Paralympians. For example, Ellie Robinson, a 15-year-old Paralympic swimmer who suffers from achondroplasia, a cause of dwarfism, was taken to see her idol, Ellie Simmons, swim in the previous 2012 Paralympics. After seeing her idol's performances at the Paralympics, Ellie Robinson was inspired to follow in the footsteps of her idol. At the 2016 Paralympics, Ellie Robinson won a gold medal in the S6 50-meter butterfly and crushed the Paralympic record in that event. Ellie Robinson's story displays just how impactful that Paralympic Games are on people around the world. The modern Paralympics have also ushered in a time period of equality and fair treatment of disabled athletes and disabled members in society. In the 2012 Olympics, Oscar Pistorius was the first double amputee to compete in the regular Olympics. However, many Olympians before him have come setting a clear path for disabled athletes to compete alongside able-bodied ones. Neroli Fairhall of New Zealand was the first athlete to compete in the Olympics after previously competing in the Paralympic Games. She went on to set the precedent of disabled athletes being able to compete in both the Paralympics and the Olympics, proving that the Games were truly based on skill and determination, not initial physical capabilities. The Paralympics have not only retained the qualities that earlier changed history. Recently, the Paralympics took a new stand in history with their no-tolerance policy relating to the doping scandal. For the 2016 Paralympics, the International Paralympic Committee, IPC, decided to ban the entire Russian Paralympic team due to the controversial doping scandal that most believed to have been state-sponsored. The president of the IPC, Sir Philip Craven, stated in his speech banning the Russian Paralympic team,
"The complete corruption of the anti-doping system is contrary to the rules and strikes at the very heart of the spirit of the Paralympic sport. It shows a blatant disregard for the health and well-being of athletes and quite simply has no place in the Paralympic sport."
This stand in history was emphasized by the fact that the Olympics did not take the same course of action. Throughout history, the creation of the Paralympics by Sir Ludwig Gutmann has changed the well-being and mental state of the disabled and also changed the view of society towards them. His creation of the Games are a stand against the prejudiced opinions of others towards the disabled. Today, the disabled that compete in the Paralympics are viewed as heroes who constantly inspire others to take their stand in history, as shown by the disabled cyclist Megan Giglia's quote,
"It's taking something that's a negative and turning it into a positive. It's something that's going to be with me for the rest of my life, so I might as well make the most of it."
Yes, I can, suddenly, yes, I can.